Welcome back, everyone. Pal Ponder on Weather here. We have some of the strongest series of storms to pummel the West Coast in decades, as we'll walk you through the next 7 to 10 days. So let's start off with the overall big picture. And you can actually see the storm this morning. In fact, the hurricane hunters actually flew out in this storm last night and found a 955 millibar low pressure on this really strong atmospheric river event. It came ashore yesterday afternoon off the coast of California, and the highest wind gust I actually saw inland was 106 miles an hour. Now that rain shield is all the way down to the coast, and it's pouring in Los Angeles this morning. Now the storm system across the midsection of the country is finally lifted offshore that brought all the devastating wind and the tornadoes. But we're still dealing with that snow event up here into the upper Midwest, as that is slowly winding down. But beyond that, we just have a series of storms, just one after another, as you can count of 1, 2, 3, if not 4 between now and next Friday has to move across, and will be coming in off the West Coast with more heavy rain. So if you are new to the channel, like detailed weather breakdowns on North America, hit the subscribe button and you're in. You get all my daily content on this channel. So let's take a look at the overall setup in the last 30 days for your rainfall. And it's really prolific, guys. I mean, this is something we haven't seen in a very, very long time. This is actual rainfall that is observed in the last 30 days alone. And this is pretty much off the chart in these mountain regions. Over 20 inches of precipitation. And even along the coast, some of these areas in and around the Bay Area have already received about 11 inches of rain just in the last 9 days. And they've got these series of storms are going to be coming in. Obviously, the ground is extremely saturated. Now we're deeply concerned about widespread flash flooding and mudslides. It's a huge concern. We've already seen 3 fatalities in this area. So that is definitely a concern, with yet 4 to 5 more systems have to come through over the next 7 to 10 days. And let's take a look at the overall big picture, right? So here's the situation. We've got these series of troughs coming in off the West Coast. They extend all the way back down from China with this atmospheric river event. And as they pull through, they tend to pull all the moisture, but they tend to stop it along into the Rockies. All the way areas basically east of the Rockies are more or less kind of high and dry over the next 4 to 5 days. But there are some signs as we go into Thursday of next week. We are finally going to be able to see one of those pieces of troughs lifts to the eastern side of the Rockies. And once that does, that's going to pick up some of that Gulf moisture, but it's also going to bring down a little bit colder air. It is January after all. It's supposed to be cold, and we're finally going to be seeing some colder air mixed back into the pattern, and a little bit more precipitation for these areas down here into the east. So let's take a look at the overall setup for today. So the main concern is with this storm system coming in, this is pretty rare sight to see flash flood watches extend basically almost the entire width of California, from Los Angeles all the way to San Jose, and then all the high wind warnings that you're going to be dealt with these areas. I know San Francisco downtown picked up about a 60-mile-per-hour wind gust. Some of the higher elevations upwards to 80 miles an hour. And yes, in fact, I saw one report of 106-mile-per-hour wind gust in this area. So they've been really pummeled, and not just along the coast there, but even in the mountain regions. I mean, some of these areas have picked up got 15 feet of snowfall. Just incredible amounts of precipitation unfolding across the West Coast. And obviously, we are concerned about power outages. Currently, right now, we're looking at about 178,000 customers in California alone without power. So you can better believe that's going to be a definitely concern with all the tree damage that's going to be taking effect, with all the higher winds, the severe flooding of the saturated soils, the mudslides that are going to be taking place. Definitely a huge concern going forward, because this water doesn't have anywhere to go. So let's take a look at the overall drought, because obviously that is really helped out the drought situation into the West Coast. This is the new map that just came out today from the US Drought Monitor Index, and you can actually see for the first time in a long time, no part of California actually has under an exceptional drought. That's something you haven't seen in many years. So it's making a major dent in this area, filling up the reservoirs. But unfortunately, it's coming fast and furious. But once we get in the midsection of the country, we see another dry pocket across the middle of the country. Then once you get and are able to tap in some of this Gulf moisture, the drought begins to really relieve for these areas in the eastern two-thirds of the U.S. But let's take a look at the setup going forward for today. So we are going to be seeing this snowstorm across the upper Midwest start to wind down. So there's not much snow left with this, but still you could be seeing at least some snow flurries and some light snow in this area up here towards Iowa into Wisconsin up here, while this front is continuing to move and pulling all the precipitation along with it. Now it's going to be safely off out into the Atlantic, while of course we've got the flood watches in place for the entire area of California. Not just California, but all those areas in Oregon and Washington too are still going to get rain almost on a daily basis, and then snow into the interior region. So as we go into your Friday time frame, that same system continues to push through portions of Utah and western slopes of Colorado, but that's where it stops. It pretty much pulls the precipitation and puts on the brakes and doesn't allow to go east of the Rockies. So all these areas again across the middle of the country continue to remain kind of high and dry as our snowstorm will start to wind down up here into portions of New England. So let's take a look at the overall precipitation just in the next 48 hours. So as the front pulls all the precipitation out into the open waters of the Atlantic, what's left over is just any little mix of precipitation left, whatever is going to be left over from this little snow event up here. But all the action is off the West Coast with very heavy rain, and you can see tremendous amount of rain entering portions, especially northern California and even into Oregon, as well as into Washington. Some really high amounts are definitely concerned, just adding to those flood warnings. And as we go into your Saturday time frame, we have this little leveler clipper system. Again, it's not much, but at least some of these areas could pick up a dusting, maybe an inch of snow within this boundary from Iowa to Illinois to Indiana to all the way through Ohio here and portions of West Virginia. I think most of this is missed in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, much of Oklahoma, but it does pick up a little bit lighter precipitation into East Texas and to South Texas, and that just extends in portions of the southern Missouri Valley here. But then, of course, the rain just comes back with yet another atmospheric river event for portions of the West Coast, with more heavy rain entering back in the picture. And then it really doesn't stop there, because there's the setup as we go into your Saturday and your Sunday time frame. Looking at the bigger view, more higher wind gusts come aboard off the shore. There's 58 miles an hour coming in Saturday night time frame back into California, with just relentless systems just trailing behind this one. So yes, a lot of the action, at least in the next 5 days, really is confined along the West Coast with these series of atmospheric river events. But as we go into Sunday, there's subtle hints of precipitation, but again, it's not much. So that same system that comes through Saturday will just be along the coast here in South Texas and just draped across the portions of the deep south. Again, it's not much precipitation, and it's really warm down this sector. You can see where the red line is. That's your freezing line. That extends well to the north. Really very unusual for January standards. Is just, again, the West Coast just get pummeled with more heavy rain. So, and then we go into Monday. Look at the satellite picture. Yet that third atmospheric river event will start to enter the West Coast again with more compounding rain in the same areas, getting more heavy rain. But this system by Thursday actually shows signs that it gets finally east of the Rockies. So that atmospheric river event will actually travel east of the Rockies, and once it does that, it's going to be able to pick up a little bit more Gulf moisture, going to be able to tap into these areas. So these areas, say in close to Dallas, close to Oklahoma, finally seeing some rain. It's actually been a couple of weeks, so it's been pretty dry in this area. But the difference this time will actually drag down a little bit colder air. So now we're actually talking about actually below average temperatures, and something you haven't seen in a couple of weeks in this area. Well, yet another storm, and yet your fourth atmospheric river event in the last week will start to enter the west coast again, which is just another rainmaker for them. But yes, as we go into your Thursday, here's the setup on the surface map. As it's going to be able to finally pull east of the Rockies there, it drags down some of that little bit colder air. And so now we're talking some snow again in portions of Missouri, portions of Kansas here. So that drags down the freezing line a little bit as well, right? So it finally drags down a little bit colder air. You could actually see that on the temperature anomalies by the time we get into Friday, as we're actually talking about below average temperatures in this sector through the Tennessee Valley and up here into the mid-Atlantic. Again, you've been seeing a lot of record high temperatures. To finally see something like this, of course it's January, it's supposed to be cold. We finally get to talk about a little bit colder temperatures again in this area. So, but overall, the big picture, once we get beyond and head into Tuesday and next week, through Saturday, it's all about the rain that's entering portions of the West Coast. Again, it's for the most part, it's fairly high and dry across the middle of the country. But once we hit the East Coast, we're actually seeing a little bit above average precipitation into the southeast, into the east, with some below average temperature anomalies. So that makes things a little bit more interesting as we go into Friday of next week. So as we go into Friday, look at the temperatures as you wake up on Friday morning the 13th. Yeah, there's your freezing line extending finally back into Oklahoma, into Arkansas, through Tennessee, through the Carolinas, all the way points northward are going to be actually below freezing. And we're supposed to be cold in January. You finally actually see winter to come, making a little bit of a comeback here. And then that just intensifies as we go into next weekend in your Saturday time frame, as some of that backdoor front gets pulled back into the southeast. And now we're talking freezing temperatures all the way down to the coastline, Mississippi, into Alabama, into Georgia, into the Carolinas. So you can certainly say to goodbye to any severe weather threat in that sector, because you can't get severe weather with freezing temperatures. That's just not going to happen. So, but it's also going to increase the snow chances. So it's not much. I know these areas are desperately well below average for this time of year as far as snowfall totals. But on the ensemble view, with that cold air mixing in, some of that above average precipitation, backdoor front, you could be picking up at least some snow. We're talking about at least some snow in portions of the mid-Atlantic and up here into the Northeast. And I can't even rule out some least wintry precipitation. Again, it's not much, but at least some portions of the Southeast actually could be looking at some a little bit of snow to talk about in some of these areas down here near Georgia into the Carolinas by the time we get into the next Saturday timeframe. It's definitely a possibility for sure. And the GFS ensemble members actually have that as well. Not as bullish as the European guidance, but at least it's there. At least it's there even to talk about. But the wind is going to be a really concern this week. So if you're one that travels across the country, especially if you go westbound, once you cross into the central US and get out west, you definitely gotta be concerned. Very high winds, and especially once you get into California, Nevada, into Oregon. Yes, I mean, extremely windy with the compounding systems coming across with very high winds are going to be a huge concern. And that's why power outages, tree lines, power lines down, everything like that is just going to be a compounding effect. And then now that the ground is saturated, the mudslides are going to be starting to be a huge concern as well. But look at the rain. I mean, this is just some crazy intense stuff compounded with all the rain that's unfolding right now. And this is just over the next 7 days, putting another 10 to 15 inches of rain across portions of Northern California. You can only imagine what kind of problems that's going to unfold in this area. A little bit lighter amounts once you extend up into Oregon, into Washington, but you can see where the dryness is, right? Most of that does not go east of the Rockies, right? There's a dry slot here. there's definitely a dry slide. So it's not going to be able to pick up any precipitation until it taps into the Gulf. And you can actually see that down here in the deep South Texas and to Louisiana, back into Mississippi and Alabama. And once it heads northbound, it's much lighter. So this is over a week time frame. You're only talking potentially a ½ inch or to an inch of precipitation to work with. That's why the snow amounts aren't going to be that impressive, okay? But at least there's some precipitation to work with going forward by the time we get into next weekend. So I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video. Definitely hit me up on Twitter, Instagram, and on Facebook. I will be updated on this event on those platforms, and catch me in the next update where I protect you before and after storm.